down to the wire here before the big road trip from Tennessee to Colorado. Going to be spending 3 weeks out in Colorado doing a bunch of we're camping the entire time, doing a lot of wheeling and all this sort of stuff. So we're going to be living out of the back of this truck. And today I've got an exciting thing for all of you GFC owners out there. Basically going to be building beef racks. GFC sells roof racks for this thing, but they're awfully expensive and pretty limited on mounting options. So what I have here is an option that is definitely more DIY, but it's all bolt-on for the most part, and it costs about a third of the price. I also have a giant solar panel, 250 watts. Picked it up on Facebook, and one of you guys in one of the comments 1 or 2 videos ago said anything Overland costs at least $400, and you know, I kind of agree with you there. You just have to be a little resourceful. So all the materials, and I'll show you up close what you're gonna need to do this on your GFC. All the materials and the solar panel cost me less than $300. That's probably actually on the higher scale. I don't even think it cost me that much. So went on Facebook Marketplace, found somebody selling panels that they took off the roof of their house, and 250 watts for 50 bucks.
Nice.
Can't beat it. And then all the materials, it's basically just hardware, some extruded aluminum, some brackets, and with a drill bit. Well, let me bring you in. I'll show you what we're gonna need to do the install, and we'll knock this thing out. For starters, we have this giant 250 watt panel. It weighs about 42 pounds, so kind of heavy. And then I've got some connectors and wiring to run off of the solar panel connectors into my power bank. And so basically just gonna get this guy mounted to the DIY roof racks, run the cabling in the same fashion as I did in the last video with the antenna wiring, and run it inside the truck and into the power bank to charge it while I'm driving. You know, parked at camp. 250 watts is gonna charge this thing so fast, and this is the biggest solar setup I've had on this truck so far. And now on to the roof rack parts. This is everything that you should need to do the job on your own GFC. I'm gonna have links down below to everything that I used, except for maybe the hardware. You know, nuts and bolts, that's pretty easy to figure out. But I'll tell you, basically what we have here are 4 brackets, which I am going to have to drill out these bottom holes to be a little bit bigger. We're gonna drill them out to 1/2 inch, so that way they fit over the T-nuts. Then we have some extruded aluminum. These are 2x1, so 2 inches wide by 1 inch extruded aluminum. And then either side, I have them threaded to basically be 1/4 inch by 1/4 20 thread on either of these, on both ends. So that way we can screw these brackets into the extruded aluminum. And then we have some T-nuts for the GFC, which I ordered, I wanna say from Gzilla, I think is the name. They're a little bit cheaper than ordering them from GFC. And then everything else is just hardware that I picked up from Tractor Supply. So we have a bunch of 1/4 20 screws with some washers, a little bit longer 1/4 20 screws. These are gonna go into the extruded aluminum through the brackets. And then we have these carriage bolts. I think these would be called carriage bolts, with some washers and nuts, and that's what's gonna hold the solar panel to the extruded aluminum. I've got, you know, sockets, a couple drill bits, blue Loctite, 1/2 inch socket to drill out these holes to be bigger to fit the T-nuts. But that is basically everything, and again, cost me probably definitely less than 200 bucks to get all these parts, not including the solar panel. So we're maybe like 250 bucks in on this project. So that's about what you would pay for one beef rack from GFC. Now the extruded aluminum, I ordered these to be exactly 53 inches in length. You may have to grab a tape measure for your GFC. It's basically you're measuring the width of the entire roof, and at least the first gen Tacoma GFC, 53 inches is the go-to. And then again, have the manufacturer thread or put some thread in on either side on both holes, both sides at 1/4 20, and then you can just use 1/4 20 bolts to screw into here, which makes the job just very easy. You can do that yourself, but it's so cheap when you're just ordering this to have them machine the threading in. So basically I'm gonna start today by taking the 1/2 inch drill bit and drilling out these bottom holes, so that way we can mount it to the T-track using the T-nuts. So I've just got the bracket mounted using a C-clamp, so that way it holds it still while I drill. And I'm gonna work my way up to 1/2 inch, so that way it's not so difficult to drill through. But we're just gonna drill these out to be bigger. There we go, 1/2-inch holes, so that way the T-nuts fit down into it. Rinse, repeat on the other 3 brackets. This step is done. We have drilled out all of these bottom holes to 1/2-inch, and the reason that's important is if we take one of these T-nuts, it protrudes from the track on the GFC, this bit, so we need this bit to slip into there, so that way the whole bracket will sit nice and flush on the T-track, and otherwise it wasn't going to fit through, and now at the 1/2-inch, it sure does. Now the next step is to kind of get the holes drilled out, so that way I can mount the solar panel to the actual GFC, or sorry, to the extruded aluminum roof racks. So the goal here is to basically mount it on the side, so that way ideally what would happen is the solar panel would sit just below the roof rack, so that way I could still put something on top of the roof rack, say a kayak or whatever, and it won't necessarily be hitting or touching the solar panel because the solar panel will be just sitting below the roof rack rails. So how to do that is going to basically be figuring out where on this to drill. Now I am slightly concerned that the weight of this, which is about 42 pounds, is going to be too much weight to just be held on like this instead of sitting on top of the roof rack rails. So worst case scenario, we can swap it out and do this style where the solar panel sits on top of the roof rack. However, I would love to be able to get this to work because one, it keeps an extra 1.5 inches of space off the top of the truck. So that way, you know, I'm just always trying to keep the truck as minimally tall as possible. So I just need to figure out where to drill holes. I'm gonna do 4 bolts on either end, and then we'll see if we can get this set up to work well. So the solar panel, 39 inches wide, 4 bolts, probably do like 3 inches in on either side, and then maybe, I don't know, 10 inches from those holes towards the middle, and that should be sufficient. So if you can see, there's different lines or ridges in the solar panel frame here. I'm gonna try to drill a hole as close to the top of the solar panel as possible because that's gonna push the solar panel down and give me more room. But I'm gonna start with just a small hole and see how it looks on the inside, make sure it's not gonna run into anything, and we'll have plenty of room. And that is definitely gonna be too low. So with that being said, we're gonna have to go up probably to the middle line here because this hole is just gonna be way too close to the actual solar panel. So that's why we test it. And just because I drilled a hole there, I'm gonna move this into like 3.5 inches. Or you know what, we'll make it 2 inches. Okay, so that should be plenty of room here to be able to get the bolt through. So 2 inches it is. I'm just gonna drill out all 4 of my holes along here and then do the other side, and then we can see how it all is gonna fit up. Got all of the holes drilled out and just kept stepping up in drill bit size until we can get our bolt to basically fit through it. So next we got to adhere these to the extruded aluminum and then bolt it up to the solar panel. The reason I chose these carriage type bolts for this install is they slip into the grooves on the extruded aluminum. So what we can do is, since we're going to mount the solar panel this way, slide all 4 of these in. Obviously, we'll take the nuts and washers off, slip the solar panel in, and then tighten it down. So I want my panel to sit passenger side. I'm not gonna put it in the middle. I want it to lean more towards the passenger side, so that way at least a part of the roof rack is gonna be just not covered with the solar panel. So what I wanna do is get this pretty close to the edge here, and then just line up the bolts with the holes that we drilled. This part's a little tricky just because you gotta be moving stuff around, but eventually you'll get it. and just slide that in there. And if the bolts kind of get stuck, just put some WD-40 or something in the track of the extruded aluminum, and that'll help you keep things sliding around a bit. But there you have it. And I want this, as you can see, pretty close to the edge of the truck, because this will get flipped over, and then we'll have this space here if we ever want to mount something to the extruded. But just being kind of smart with the space to maximize the amount of roof rack we have. Okay, and now we get to bolt everything up. So I'm gonna put a washer on first, and then we'll put the nut over top of that. And before we put the nut on, I'm gonna do my best here to get some thread locker onto the threads of the bolt. Okay, and now I don't have like a torque spec for this, but being that the extruded is aluminum, the frame of the solar panel is aluminum, don't go too nuts with it. Just make sure it's tight enough. If that makes sense. Just tight enough. Everything is tightened down, and the solar panel is basically ready to go onto the roof of the truck. So the plan is, obviously it's gonna sit more passenger side, and I'm also gonna put it as far forward as possible, because obviously the tent wedges up like this, and I wanna have as much of the weight down on the bottom, so that way the struts on the GFC aren't trying to bring a bunch of weight that's sitting up here up all the way super high. But then also, if I keep it towards the front here, it'll be less wiring that I have to basically run down the side of the GFC and then into the truck. So just pushing it this far this way, and then keeping it passenger side. So I've got the panel just kind of sitting on top of the roof, trying to line up where I want to have the bracket sitting and where I want to position it. Obviously it's going to be pushed this way towards the passenger side of the truck, and I've got my wiring kind of cleaned up, everything loosely zip tied, and then the wiring is going to run basically down off the T-track in between the cab and the camper, down this seam, and then it goes up into the truck here and then into the bed through a access port. So next up is to get this thing kind of mounted roughly, and then I'll show you guys probably on the last bracket how it all goes together, because it's just the same for all 4 brackets, but then you can see it kind of in its final state. So it was gonna be kind of tough to show you guys while I was doing it, putting the bolts in, but the roof rack is fully installed with the solar panel attached. And so basically what you do is you put your 2 longer 1/4-20 bolts into the extruded on either side, and then you put your 2 bottom bolts that are shorter into the T-nuts, and then I've put washers on those just to space them out, so that way the T-nuts actually lock before it hits, you know, the backside of the GFC track. And then what's nice too is I put the wire loom for the antenna actually behind the bracket, so it behind the wire loom, so that way it holds it in place along with those clips that I added. And then same thing up here, holds the antenna loom in place. And then all that's left to do really is run my solar panel cable wiring up and tuck it in here. I'm gonna use some clips to tuck that along the underside of this panel, and then it's gonna run down this seam just like the antenna wire. So almost there. And then obviously need to open up the entire GFC tent and make sure that it actually opens, and the weight of the solar panel and roof racks don't hinder that, those basically, what are they called? Not springs, but shocks that push the tent up, making sure that it still opens, and then also that we leave enough wiring for the flex of the tent opening. So I'm gonna knock that out, and then I'll show you guys hopefully the final result. We'll plug it in, make sure it works, and all said and done. So just used some clips to keep it adhered up top there. It's gonna be kind of tough to show you. Yeah, it's pretty dark, but it's basically these little 3M clips that just you can put a wire loom into, and then they 3M sticky side onto whatever it is that you're attaching it to. So I put each wire on its own little set of tabs, and then it conjoins with the antenna wire, goes down, can't even see it, and then up into the truck bed. You can't even see it. So it's all well protected and well hidden. Basically now is the big moment of truth. I'm gonna pop the tent and see if the wires get hung up or if I left myself enough slack, and that should wrap up the install. I didn't hear any wire snapping, so one of my clips came out for the antenna. I'll have to lengthen that, but it seems as though we left plenty of room. Yeah, plenty of room for the solar wiring. So that worked out great. I just have to kind of adjust some of the clips here for this guy, which maybe I just put it and move it back a little bit. And I think that should give us enough room for the antenna wire, so that way it doesn't get hung up anymore. And if we take a peek at the Solix, it's only pulling in 5 watts right now because it's super cloudy and the sun's about to go down, but it's working nonetheless. And I think it looks pretty good up there. That's definitely a massive solar panel, but between that and the new cell boosting antenna, I think the rig is just about ready to hit the road for Colorado. I have an update on the dreadful exhaust situation that I will share with you guys in the next video. But as of right now, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, everything's gonna continue to go as planned. A couple more hiccups to deal with, but hopefully they don't turn into anything more than hiccups. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys hanging out for these videos, and they're kind of all over the place, and I'm kind of rushing through these at a rapid pace because I'm just trying to get so much done in such little time and keep running into issues like the exhaust. So updates on that coming soon. And we'll be doing, if the trip actually goes on as planned, we'll be doing a walk around in the next video of both rigs, because girlfriend is taking her Tacoma as well with the GFC. So we'll do a kind of a sit and talk about what we're going to be doing on this trip, where we plan to go, and then also do a walk around of both this rig and her rig, and kind of go over all the things, tools, equipment, camping gear that we're going to be bringing that are going to hopefully help us along the way. So with that being said, I love you all. Keep elevating, my friends. See you in the next one.